are quantity surveyors. Quantity surveyors are professionals that are involved in giving advice in tendering and contractual arrangement, taking into account the client brief and the information given by them from the designers. Now, that is out of the way. Assalamualaikum. Today, I will present to you about the main task, which is tender evaluation report, which is done by quantity surveyor. What is tender evaluation? Tender evaluation is a stage where the tender submitted by the tenderers will be evaluated. Who is involved? Client will form a tender committee members to evaluate this tender. When is it? It is after the opening procedures of the tender are done. What is tender validity period? Tender validity period is starting from the closing date of the tender until the award of the project to a successful tenderer. Tender evaluation process have 3 stages. The first stage starts from listing all the tender price. Tender price are listed from lower to higher price received as per this table. Secondly, QS will analyze the tender price. Tender price will be compared to the QS cost estimate. Any tender price that gets lower or higher than the plus-minus percentage of the cost estimate will be rejected. Thirdly, QS will evaluate compulsory document. Next, QS will check the arithmetical error that are present in the BQ, and they will show evidence of the error by taking or doing correction in red ink. The last step of the first stage is shortlist of qualified tenders that have reasonable tender sum and have complete compulsory document. The second stage of tender evaluation process starts from analysis on compliance of tender. How do we know whether the tenderers are complied or not? First, form of tender has been signed by tenderers. Second, the signing person has been given the power to sign. Third, tender price is stated in the form of tender. Fourth, tender returned all the basic tender documents. Fifth, PKK or CIDB registration are still valid. Lastly, proposed construction period is stated in the form of tender. The next step of the second stage is analysis on completeness of tender. The QS have to make sure that the tender are complete and have all the mandatory documents, which are addendum, form of tender, schedule of rates, list of summary of tender, design proposal specification, pricing by contractor, etc., account bank statement, which is for the last 3 months, and project report by project superintendent officer. Thirdly, analysis on construction period. QS have to make sure that the construction period does not exceed the construction period which is stated in the tender document and have reasonable construction period. Analysis on adequacy of minimum capital. There are many forms of capital: rolling capital, shares, unit trust, fixed deposit, etc., balance of credit facilities. And also for joint ventures, it will use minimum capital, which is analyzed based on the combined equity of both parties. Here are the method of calculation. The last step of the second stage is analysis on performance of current work, which QS will check work still on progress during the tendering, and there are no work below 30% of work schedule, and there is no termination record. The final stage, which is the third stage, will evaluate on the financial and technical capability. Financial capability will be evaluated by dividing the working capital and yearly project value. Well, technical capabilities will focus on 3 things, which are staff or key personnel, that the tenders should list all the numbers of technical staff with their working experience. Second, the tender's asset, which should be mentioned whether they are owned or hire purchased before the closing of tender. And their working experience and workload shall be in the total work value for the past 5 years. And it will give an advantage if the tenders have a similar project to the proposed tender. The final step for the tender evaluation process is the tender report. QS will summarize and mention every evaluation that has been stated in the 3 stages. And QS will make a conclusion about each tender based on each of their capabilities and recommend 1 tenders that are successful to the client. However, it is the client's choice whether or not to pick the tenders. I hope you learned a thing or two about tender evaluation. Now I will pass to my next presenter, which will explain about the special task.